Since antiquity, humans have dreamed of harnessing the power of gods. People crave the ability most elusive of the gods, the power to create life. We see historical records of claims or descriptions of attempts to replicate this power. Automata, homunculi, feats of alchemy, golems, etc. It was believed that through great precision and skill, a master craftsman could house a soul within an intricate mechanical construction. This led to more contemporary works of fiction describing Dr. Frankenstein's monster, advanced robots that must be given a code in order to serve their creator, and even machines rising up to overthrow their human masters to reign supreme themselves. Today, most of us have heard the phrase artificial intelligence, but with modern advancements, it can seem as if this idea has leapt from the pages and into reality. As we turn our minds out, we ask the question, what should we think of AI? Welcome to Up+Out, the podcast of honest questions and earnest answers. I'm Sam Miller, and with me today I have Will Hodge to my left and Zander Fadley to my right.
I'm not making a quip today. I'm not going to do it.
You're showing restraint.
I'm showing restraint. I don't need to have the first word outside of the introduction. I do actually now have the first word because I said it was good.
You stole it with the...
Still did it. I'm pretty sure it's mostly us here is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Today, This why you can continue. It's a bad habit, obviously.
Well, now that Xander's done making trouble for me,
Mm-hmm.
I raised the question of what should we do with AI? What should we really think about AI? And I wanted to bring up this topic, and I guess as a disclaimer, maybe not the best term here, but I work in computer science. I have not worked on AI or generative models or anything that is related to that, which we could go into further if that seems appropriate. But I have worked with several people that have worked on generative models and used that for various applications with things with the military, things with, various applications.
For generative models, do you mean just like I use Copilot for some artistic generations?
Yeah, so...
But you mean something broader than that if you're talking about military applications.
So it is the same root idea.
Uh-huh.
So what we think of right now, and I don't remember exactly how GPT is defined, but that's the overarching idea. We have large models of data, basically since the rise of data science and large data warehousing and so on and so forth. It has allowed massive data collection, which has allowed us to basically tokenize all of the ideas in language, music, art, etc. Basically anything you really want to train it against. And that's what is allowing us to generate these things. And so when I say AI, I'm specifically talking about generative AI. It is not truly imitating. Well, it is truly imitating intelligence, but it is not producing novel thought. It is replicating patterns of thought that it has observed.
That appears to be something.
Right. And so with that thought, people have actually expressed a feeling of almost like junk food when they do consume some AI generated stuff because of the fact that it is kind of substance free to some degree, even though it in and of itself can be an interesting tool to get, a means to an end in that regard. It is an interesting tool to work with as somebody in computer science.
I have a random question.
Okay.
Because you guys know a lot more about AI than I do. With like AI images where you get that uncanny valley feeling where you can tell it's an AI generated image. Mm-hmm. Can you do that the same way with like AI generated text based models? Like if you can you still tell that it's AI generated, or is it a lot harder to grasp that with the text based AI?
I think it can depend. If you...
It depends on how like elaborate the thing is.
Yeah, so it depends on the subject matter. I think
Yeah.
in some cases, I think in like what you're asking it for and the precision. Like some of the more interesting generative stuff is like, hey, make up a poem about farts written in the style of Dr. Seuss. Sorry, terrible example, but you tend to get like a very specific feel. And it's looking at all of what it's identified as Dr. Seuss, and it recognizes some pattern. I feel like even the language around AI is wrought with
humanize it.
Like, yeah, like it's like even just saying it is AI, I feel like is already a concession, and that's why I tried to distinguish that it is generative AI. Like it is aping a pattern that is purely mathematical. But to answer your question of like, can you tell? It just really depends. I think it really depends.
I feel like it depends on the image sometimes too with the image ones. Like a lot of them you can like see stuff in the background, especially if it's has like a lot of people in the frame where it gets like the hands messed up or...
A lot of them
They've
better.
gotten a lot better at the hands.
It keeps getting better.
There are certain... So one of the big things about all of this is that humans are very good at pattern recognition. So like we've kind of moved past the phase where you look at the hands if you're looking at like the cutting edge stuff. And now you're looking at finer details. So there was one example where they put out a picture and said which one is AI, and I think they all ended up being AI, but one of them was like the best AI one, and it was a slight thing. Like she was wearing a ring on her ring finger, but on her right hand as opposed to her left hand. So it recognizes that a person would wear a ring on that finger for a particular purpose, and it's very obviously supposed to be a wedding ring and an engagement ring and then wedding band, but it's on the wrong hand.
Is that thrown into the category? I read a bit about like AI hallucination, where it's like the hallucination term is used for like you can if you're telling somebody to draw like an image for you, like say you're wanting them to draw an alligator, but they've never seen an alligator before, and you're trying to explain to them what an alligator looks like, and they draw it out, and it's like almost an alligator, but it's missing little details that like those small details like the ring finger.
I think that's a fairly good illustration of that idea, because what is truly happening, and again, I'm not pretending to be an expert on specific, like what the large language models or anything are truly doing, because I haven't worked with that stuff, but they are basically labeling points of data, and it's basically categorizing all these things in the huge models that they have, that these things are those things. And so when you say, I want an alligator, it goes, oh, I was told that these are alligators, but you might get, it on the beach, but you didn't ask for it on the beach, or you might get it in the jungle and you didn't ask for it in the jungle necessarily, but they're like inferring based on the other tokenized data that's been fed into.
Well, let's take a step back here, because I think you're using a term that may not be immediately apparent. You're using tokenization, and so by tokenization, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're actually in computer science, I just have some familiarity with it. It is where the AI models don't look at words as words.
Right.
They look at them as individual concepts. So it looks like the word alligator, and it says alligator is an individual thing. It is, it gives it its own name in its algorithm, and says this is like comma QB. This is that token. And then it now has that data set that it can link together places where it sees it interacting with other tokens.
Right.
So it's
witchcraft.
Yeah, well, so alchemy is kind of alchemy is a fair comparison, because you're abstracting this word into the idea of the word, which gets into like I don't want to get too far out there.
Let me throw a hook in real quick.
Yeah.
We as humans tend to be very symbolic. Like the things we process, we look at things, the way we use words, like we have so much of an idea of what this thing is, but what these they're called transformers. What the transformers are doing is they take this thing that's labeled thing, and I know I've introduced a new term, and I apologize, that's the T in GBT. It's generative something transformer. It's like pre something something. I don't remember what the P is.
I can look it up.
Yeah, go ahead and do that while I speak. And so we like hear the word alligator, and alligator isn't like an absolute thing. It means all these things to us.
Pre-trained.
Pre-trained. Okay, that's actually pretty straightforward. Yeah. The transformer part is actually the biggest, like, what actually is this thing? The transformer is the algorithm, and that's the thing that I won't be able to explain, but that's what all makes all this stuff
Well, that's
work.
the proprietary information.
That's the proprietary information. Yeah. You can look up models on, on research documents and stuff like Google's produced, OpenAI's produced. And so if you want to understand more, look up AI transformers. But with those transformers, they're taking it, they're turning it into a numerical value, because that's all. Like when they talk about computers really working in ones and zeros, that is literally true.
Yeah.
It must break it down into an electric pulse. And so that thing doesn't at all mean the symbol of alligator. It means a literal electrical impulse that then is associated with all of these other electrical impulses.
It creates a network of meaning around the word's context. It gets into a very... I don't know if interesting is the right word, because it's not going to be interesting to anyone. But like the theory of language is that there are 3 points of inference, I think is kind of how it goes, in any sort of dialogue, right? There's the speaker who then has an idea in their head. Then they transform that into words.
Right.
They then go to the other person that they then translate back into an image in their head. So their image is the third thing between the two people. The subject is the thing between the two people in a conversation. And in this AI generative model, it doesn't have that actual image because it is inferring it from the other sources. So that's how it's not true communication. It's how it's not true intelligence, because it's not basing it off of the same sort of thing. The term that I don't know if I actually coined it, but I was having a conversation with my brother, and I used a term that I've never heard before in coordination, which gets into some of the ethical problems with generative AI, is that in the end, all these different AI models are forms of intellectual kleptocracy.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't, kleptocracy is, your $7 word, very fun. It means theft. It means a hierarchy of thieves, is essentially what it breaks down to.
I like that.
So intellectual kleptocracy is because they're using all of this third-party material and training their models on it. So that's how you can say, I want to have a picture of Popeye the Sailor Man
as president
Lincoln in the style of Rembrandt.
Right.
And you can get something like approximates that, because they've trained their AI. They know that this token Rembrandt means all these different paintings that it's studied, because Rembrandt is related to those. Yeah. And then it knows Abraham Lincoln is this dude here, and knows that Popeye is this guy here. So it can then smoosh them all together.
Right. I think an important thing to call out with that is, if you're not actively utilizing AI at all, like a ChatGPT, like a DALL-E or whatever, to generate the images, I think that one of the things that escapes a lot of people is that this usually requires multiple rounds of fine-tuning your own prompts to try and get to the results you actually need. And I think that part is missed for a lot of people, of like, they think you just do the thing and then you get all this back. And it's
a lot of times you'll like put in something and get back something that's like not what you're looking for.
Right. I mean, several times I've tried to, I tend to use, with coding, I tend to use AI as kind of like a super Google. And so I'll be like, hey, how do I do this thing? What would that look like? And it'll spit out this thing, and you'll go, not quite. What if I did this thing with this other thing? And then it will kind of try and do it again. But it can be very frustrating, because it'll hook onto the first part and it won't let go of it.
Yeah.
And so I've run into that several times.
Yeah. I mean, for the purposes that I use it, I have a separate Substack that I have where I do writing. I don't know why I'm being so mysterious about it. It's easy to find. Yes, whatever. But all those images that I use on that Substack are AI generated. I use the words from the stories that I'm writing and plug it into the Microsoft Copilot, which I think uses GPT-4, ChatGPT-4, for its image learning at this point. And yeah, it sometimes will take me longer to find the right image than it does to write the short story.
Right.
Because it will latch onto that. And they've introduced something new in the more recent ones where you can start a new topic. So it will kind of forget everything that you talked about before, and it'll give you a little bit of a blank slate. Yep. I guess I'm giving you advice in the middle of our podcast.
I'm familiar with these things. And you can also give it like negative prompts of like, not this.
Yes.
And
I will say,
there's like,
take out the birds.
There's a whole
it won't take out the birds.
There's like a whole idea of like prompt engineering now that's kind of invading my field of expertise and vocation of like, is this really a thing? Is this actually going to take off? Maybe we'll have to actually see what AI truly becomes.
I think that can help us pivot though into sort of the, I guess what is the AI threat sort of, how like everyone is saying that AI is going to take over everyone's jobs and won't have anything left to do.
Including my own.
Yeah.
Including my own.
Do you feel like that's overblown?
Yeah, that's what I was building.
Interacting with it seems way more overblown.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, so from the layman's perspective, before we get your more professional opinion, your more adept opinion, is that you have to kind of chart a middle ground, because we are looking at what is publicly available, and the chatter is that like that the stuff that's actually available at OpenAI and all
they're
those places,
utilizing themselves.
They're utilizing themselves as like just leaps and bounds better. Just the quick tangent is that you were talking about how computers only use 1 0 cents currently until they perfect quantum computing, because then they have 4 bits of data that they can store in a single,
which is going to like
portions of data that can
that blows everything out of the water. It is not a tangent that we need to take.
It doesn't really. It doesn't actually blow anything out of the processing speed.
The density of computation goes way up.
Right, because it's by a power of 2 powers of magnitude. Because you have 4, but once again, don't need to get into that.
Right.
It is very cool. That will be more revolutionary than AI.
Right.
I think is what will be, because AI will be built off of the back of that processing speed. So AI is.
Are they close to that?
I mean, there are operable.
Yes.
There are operable computers. They just aren't cost effective, and
it's a similar problem of like how computers used to like fill entire rooms, and you could literally like basically sit in the computer. I said literally and basically, anyways. You could sit in the room of the computer as it was all around you. Basically, quantum computing is the same thing is happening. You have a massive device that is immensely power hungry. Some that are tied directly to some like power providers. Yeah. So they're getting it from whatever reactor or power plant that they can pull
just
directly from,
because
it is so demanding. If it shared the same infrastructure,
so everyone would watch their lights dim.
So the real goal is to get that down to where the power required to do that process,
and they'll get there relatively quickly.
And similarly, of how like we've got supercomputers in all of our pockets.
Going.
I'm more excited about quantum computing than I am about AI, really, because I was trying to figure out how best to say it, because I think. The quantum computing is a technology, and the AI is more of a tool. You know, it's kind of like a gradation of scale there.
Yeah, no, I like that, and that's actually that's where my mind was going earlier. I wasn't going to take it in the like strictly professional sense, but in the idea of like it taking all of our jobs. And what we've seen is, I mean, throughout history, has been a tug of war of like, new thing is created, you know. And we're all going to lose our jobs, and then we're ultimately fine. Things do change. Like
the steam engine is going to, no one will have jobs anymore. Well, then we invented factories essentially,
right?
And now we can. It's a efficiency multiplier, everything that we're doing.
Yeah, and it almost is like an extrapolation of like what is the idea of doing this work, all the way to the point of where it's like an elevating factor to where you're not working at this level, now you can work at this level because you have a new tool.
Yeah, I was going to say, it allows people like creators who aren't necessarily able to like draw and create their own images,
or can't. Like
Yeah,
literally,
they can't.
I'm bad at drawing.
just put in like shoot it into AI and you get your image for your writing prompt or
Yeah,
whatever.
which can
Yeah,
be
and
quite fun.
One
you
thing,
know?
one thing that you do run into problems with though is that if you have a non-original idea that you're trying to draw. It's like I have some things I've tried to get it to draw that don't have reference out in the world because it's like an original
It's not
creation.
been labeled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and it's like, what do you mean? What am I supposed to do with this?
Okay,
Because
so-
it literally cannot know a
Right.
new idea.
I love that you went this way. So the question I begged, and just to reiterate it, what should we think about AI? So I would make the statement that AI is simply a tool. It is an iteration on an idea of what we can do with computing powers, and basically gives us a broad access to a lot of data all at once. But it is not thinking. This is not a thing
Yeah.
that is existing on its own. You'll see crazy stories of people being like, "Oh, we hooked up two AIs, and then they started talking a new language, and then one time one decided it was suicidal or something crazy," and
That's my favorite thing. Going back to the old AI chatbots, all of those conversations eventually devolved into the AI chatbot calling you a robot and you calling it a robot because
Right.
it's referencing the other conversations it has.
Yes.
And the first question that people ask this AI is like, "Are you a robot? Are you alive?"
Well, that's the funny thing too, is like it feels like it's been pulled from like a 4chan or something. Like, it is just scraping Reddit. It's scraping all the most internet-y parts of the internet.
Yeah.
And it's really, that's where the generative part comes in.
Mhm.
And so like it is this tool, but we're struggling against this idea that it is so revolutionary, but also like it's just this simple thing, and I feel like kind of neither are true, but both are true at the same time. Like it is an interesting step in computing process, but it isn't like, oh my goodness, it's its own soul. It's there are some people that are really pushing to like worship some of these things in cases, and like one of the Google engineers was like, yeah, this is like we've created a thing
Create
that
something
is
sentient.
yeah, it's sentient, and we need to start like giving it rights and so on and so forth. And I might be conflating a couple ideas there, but
No, I think that was.
I think it was
I mean,
all
it
the
was
same.
it was a long diatribe.
Yes.
But it was like a 20-page document. That you were about to say something.
Idolatry. No.
Well, no, I think that your starting point is accurate. That to bring it more philosophically
Mhm.
based, that humans have a desire to be the masters of the universe, and
Right.
what is greater than creating ex nihilo, right?
Right.
Something out of nothing.
Mhm.
So this idea that
We can already do that. They're called kids.
well, that's not ex nihilo. It's not
Okay.
out of nothing. It's
Right.
out of pre-existing genetic material.
Okay.
But this is something where you are putting yourself on a pedestal, like you were talking about, on
yeah.
creating life, which is the biggest question currently in a lot of science. Is like, how did we get from inorganic to organic material? How did
Right.
we create that first spark of life, whatever it was?
Mhm.
We'll cover that in a different episode.
Right.
What we think about that, but because whatever. Different episode. We've already gotten off on enough tangents, quantum computing and whatnot.
Yes.
But it is going into this. The idea is that these are mirrors of things that they're pre-existing. They're pre-existing,
Yes.
and I don't know if you ever like stacked up mirrors, but there is nothing. There's no such thing as a perfect mirror.
Mhm.
It's always imparting something into the image itself. So if you look at like general mirrors, if you go to a hall of mirrors, you'll see that everything starts to get green tinted.
Mhm.
Generally, it's green tinted. It's the same sort of thing with these AI generative models. I'm speaking as though I know this for a fact, but your example of the two AI chatbots creating their own language is what would happen to everything if you just let them go and go and go, and no one ever created anything else.
Right.
Because they're going to be referencing reference material that's
Exactly.
been referencing something else.
Right.
And it'll eventually just become either it will generate its own thing that's not interfaceable with human intellect, and therefore useless.
This is the other part that I think is interesting. and you finish your thought, right?
Or something, or just something that doesn't even mean anything to anything.
Right.
I think that kind of finishes the thought.
Well, with the idea of it, like, I'll say devolving into its own language, which is so false of what is actually happening. Anybody, here's the struggle. People that are actually aware of what's going on and to also be the ones that claim that this thing is truly sentient. What is happening in that instance is because it's all labeled with identifiers, and it's just taking
it's a token of a token.
These
of a token.
two, these two bits match up with these bits. It's the same idea as like brute forcing passwords.
Mm-hmm.
Passwords aren't stored as the password you type in. They are stored as a encoded string of alphanumeric string is what it is. It's letters and numbers, and that string can match another string based on the computation that goes into making it. And it's usually used with like extremely high prime numbers that you wouldn't be able to guess or calculate based on how all the algorithm works. Anyways, I won't get too esoteric there, but these two strings can match the same encoded string that are completely different purely because of how the thing is computed. So what happens with AI is all of these things are labeled, and then all of it is generated, and all of these things match, and you'll get the weird, why did it give me this? Why is there a balloon in my picture? I didn't say anything about clowns, parties, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. Nothing about balloons.
Yeah, to sort of 1,000-foot view that it is taking the tokens for like the bird and saying that when I see the and bird, that means one thing. An article adjective actually is a very useful portion of language in the broadest context. So then it will create a new token for the bird, and then that whatever it gives that numeric value becomes the bird. So then you have a sentence that says instead of the bird flew, it would be JQRS flew, and it knows that it's saying the bird flew. Mm-hmm. But it is now tokenized these two tokens into a singular one, and as it refines that over and over, then you can get to JQRS flew into when I see the bird flew, it means this right here, which is PDR, whatever it ends up choosing for it. Mm-hmm. So that's how you can get to a point where two computers are talking without using any actual language, because they were never using language in the first place. Right. It was always inference.
Right. Yes, exactly right.
It was never thinking. In the subject, verb, article, adjective section. It was looking at this block of pixels and this block of pixels and doesn't even know what the bird flu means. Mm-hmm.
I bet a lot of people don't even realize that these models can be overtrained. Mm-hmm. And so they are given rounds of training against the data set. And then it applies a neural network to where these nodes, there's different terms for different things, but basically the little identifiers go through these steps of computation to give you these things on the end. And it kind of becomes magic because it actually produces something at the end. But you give it rounds of training, and you train it just a little bit, it doesn't do a very good job. You train it a decent amount, it can do a pretty good job. That's what we see with, GPT. Olama is another one. And I mean, there's several different models that are utilized. And there's like a plethora of companies now participating in this because it's booming. If you then super train that model, it drops in reliability. Mm. It has now been overtrained. And what we're seeing is that as the same AI generated articles are now on the internet, images are on the internet, so on and so forth.
You get your Gemini summaries at the top of Google.
Yeah, and now that those are out there, they are also feeding back into these new models, and they are actually polluting
other AI and it's diluting itself.
Yes. It is literally watering down itself. Mm. And so now it seems like an arms race of like, can we make this process better, this algorithm better to counteract? Exactly.
One wrinkle in this that we haven't talked about yet is the smoke and mirrors of AI as well.
Oh yeah.
One of the best examples is those grab and go Amazon shops that they had, where they said that their AI video cameras were taking pictures of everything and charging it to your Amazon account without you going anywhere. What was actually happening is that it was guessing, and then they employed thousands of people, I think it was in Africa, as data validators.
A lot of this happens.
And they just sat in a room and said, is this correct? Yes, no. They'd push a button for yes or no. Say, it's actually this. And that's validating the AI, also training the AI. But it's just thousands of people sitting in a room
giving an input.
Giving yes or no. And so in the end, the AI is not actually doing anything. Now, over the long run, technically that would probably improve itself. But they shut them down because they're like, it's not cost effective to do this.
Right.
And also, it's like kind of they're paying not great wages and blah, 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 blah.
Artificial intelligence was also such an overloaded term. Like we're seeing some of the fruits of that, but also are not at all at the end goal of artificial intelligence.
It's the illusion.
It is an illusion.
Right?
Well, also, I think that it was such a semantically overloaded term before it was even actually invented, right? Because it was creatively invented first. Like people thought of this idea, and that points to the Dr. Frankenstein's monster, and even going to Isaac Asimov's do Robots Dream of Electric Sheep. The concept of AI pre-existed AI, and those stories don't actually cover the generation portion, like when AI actually starts to where it's to that level. So we've already imbued AI with this level of power that they're basically trying to catch up to our expectations of AI.
It's interesting how it's changed over the years. Like there's the example of the story of Talos, which was basically a statue filled with some magic liquid that allowed it to live as if it were human. And then all the way to where we see automata and how they are really sophisticated machinery, like truly like gears and levers and pulleys all functioning inside, that would make it run and act as if it were a living soul. And to now, to where, it was like circa 1940s, where the idea of a electronic or artificial brain really, really hit its peak, to where they were trying to figure out how to make some computer system that could go inside of a human skull and then live. And that's where AI really hit its stride. But what we really are seeing with the Amazon example, in a lot of sense, that's actually just a very sophisticated and complex algorithm. And they tried to extrapolate like what we actually experience as humans into mathematical reasoning. That there was an absolute way to calculate what you would do based on these computations. Like you could do all of the addition and subtraction and so on to determine what will I, Sam, do next based on all of these inputs. And so it still is a pretty prevalent theory in many ways that we are just the product of like the chemical interactions in our mind, and that we are more or less predictable if we could figure out the factors leading into that. With all of that, we saw things like the Turing machine and in Turing tests, and like could a machine potentially convince a human that it was a human, and again was extremely sophisticated algorithms. But with the Amazon example and the YouTube algorithm and so on and so forth, we actually do see it's a sophisticated process that's imitating some kind of sentience, but then is almost always backed by some outsourced organization that is reviewing all of the videos, and the algorithm's flagging it, but then there's still a human at some point that is also viewing it and going, yes, this is why it was flagged. It's in a specific case. I know at one point Facebook's profile pictures, there was entire companies hired to view every single profile picture upload and would determine if it was compliant with their guidance or not. And so there were people physically watching to see if you were, putting up risque profile pictures, and trying to get some attention. And so I feel like we have such a it is the smoke and mirrors. It is a parlor trick in a lot of ways, and even what we're calling the generative AI right now is still such a trick.
Mm-hmm.
It is not at all the way, you know, we're hearing me speak now. You know, the viewers hearing me are perceiving my language. AI would consume it in a similar manner, but it has to transform it into something completely different that wouldn't be recognizable by humans whatsoever. And people try and compare that to like translations between languages of like, you know, you say this concept, I hear it, and now I think this concept, and so I'm translating it to a different audience. But even that is a poor illustration of how far removed the ones and zeros are from what is actually said, spoken, typed, viewed in the picture, so forth. Sorry, I monologued there for a little bit.
Can we go back and you started to talk about the threat of AI, and we kind of decided that it's an overblown threat.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the threats, if there are any, even though it's overblown?
So your profession would be fine.
Yeah, obviously.
Chefs are going to be fine.
I feel like it's a lot of like data-centric sort of professions that are the most threatened.
And I think it depends.
It's things with replicable processes is a lot of what it is. So one of the ones that I've heard about is it's like contract lawyers may have their job either largely simplified or totally outsourced because, you know, you just have a AI generate a contract. They're pretty boilerplate things. And then you have somebody that gives it to somebody, they validate it, and there you go. You know, you cut out the middleman.
It's trained on all the laws.
Oh yeah, all the law. It knows all the laws, all the contract. Again,
that's why it can test.
It is
pass the bar
replicable.
Right.
Yes, because it's just like I know that these words mean this thing, so I know that this means that.
Yes, if you can draw the line from A to B, it will repeat it.
Yeah.
And that's where it's interesting because, like in medical applications, like can detect tumors, blood clots, things like that on the scans much better than a human can, because it's just taking the inputs and going, hey, this is weird, and it's like a tenth of the size that the human would have even noticed it at, but me as the computer recognize this as a pattern of anomaly, and that's extremely powerful. And then ties back into the fact that it is the tool. And computers have always been best at the truly repeatable tasks.
Mm-hmm.
The things that are actually repeatable, mundane, you know, predictable. And we just have a much fancier way of doing that. Several people I work with are using it as an assistant in our code environments, or tools that we use to actually write the code, and the tools used will generate entire methods and stuff when you give it a few little bits that it needs, a few little pieces of information to actually write it. And in some cases, it's extremely impressive, and it can speed stuff up a lot. Like writing tests for the code that is written, it's great at that kind of stuff. But if you're truly writing novel code, it fails. And when it tries to assist you in speeding up some processes, sometimes you go, no, I don't want it to be that. And I use tab a lot, you know, type tab, because we had a tool called IntelliSense that would give you like the obvious keyword next. And so you'd say, you know, blah, 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 dot, blah, 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 and you could tab to finish because it already recognized the method that you were trying to type out. Sorry, I'm trying not to get too into the weeds here, but it fails again and again with the true, like anything novel, anything that it has to truly generate a new idea, create a new idea. I think so. What jobs are truly threatened, I think, is hard to answer. And I know like my job.
Plumbers are fine.
Right.
Mechanics are fine.
If you're going in and you are like doing hands-on stuff, your job is very safe because nothing's truly addressing that yet. Like, yes, there's projects with what is it called, Atlas, and projects with
things like that.
Elon Musk's robots.
Yeah,
whatever
it
those
requires
are.
like a whole nother like
Boston Dynamics
technological field of like building like robotics behind it.
Yes.
To like augment with AI to be able to do like specific tasks and functions.
Right. What? There's something interesting in those that they've found that AI works best when it actually has a interactable form. That because when you look out into the world, it's nothing new, right? But the amount of data that you're interpreting just by looking over here, we have two eyeballs and they're slightly offset. That gives us depth of perception. You need like 5 different sensors on a robot to interact, to be able to understand that there is something called depth of perception. You have to have like LiDAR, plus you have to have your visual so that you can see things. And then to be able to recognize an object as not actually connected to something else. Like I can look at that and say, well, that's an iPad sitting on top of a table. But a computer is very difficult time knowing that these are separate objects here because you have to recognize each one as an individual thing. So when I don't know why I'm talking about it. We're talking about AI, so that's why I'm talking about that. But one of the interesting ones that they've talked about is along with the lines of Elon Musk is his automated driving and doing that for like truck drivers and stuff. And these cars are having a hard time with that exact thing. Is kind of what I'm driving at. To understand, to be able to interpret things on the road. One of the more interesting solves that I've seen for that is that instead of having them integrate into normal traffic flow, that you have dedicated AI lanes, right? So that they're all predictable in that. Now you have to trust people to not drive in those lanes, which there's always going to be some sort of chaos gremlins out there that are gonna. Why can you go way faster in the AI lane? There's nothing in there.
That's right.
But that's a future problem.
Yeah,
because
they have like spikes built on the outer edge of
the
lane.
It's something like that, or it's just like truly you have like a divider between. They're always working on the interstate, so there's always that one individual lane, but actually have like a segregated lane for just AI. That makes sense because it basically makes like a little rail line of cars.
Right.
You're building construction jobs.
Well,
maybe.
It's one time versus longitudinal employment. But that's one that's interesting. But even then, like, what was it? I saw a report that it took, was it 5,000 gallons of water to put out the battery of one of those semis that caught fire? Lithium-ion batteries. They're very dangerous. And in fact, like
they burn very hot.
They burn very hot.
Nothing can really put it out.
The best option is like there's very... I believe there are carcinogenic chemicals that you can use to douse the flames.
Yes,
but you can't get them in the water supply. So what are you supposed to do with that? It's fire, and you can't get it in water.
And then it's just lithium is so.
It's such a
works really
limited resource.
Right.
It's such a limited resource, and most of them are in China. Yeah, the big mines for lithium. So they're already trying to. The idea of. We're not going to need to get into electric cars, but like.
There's so many branches.
People are already bearish on lithium-ion electric cars at this point because of those issues.
Oh yeah, and there's really a lot of work going into finding replacements. Yeah, and well, that doesn't need to be too much.
That's not AI. That's
I guess I'll raise the question of with everything that we've discussed. Specifically, as Christians, how do you think we should approach AI? Should we approach it, as a tool, no big deal? Should we approach it with some amount of caution? Should we, be Luddites and throw it out as Yeah,
we haven't even touched how do you approach it, from your personal standpoint.
I don't think that's true because we've talked about some of the threats and issues with it.
We've talked about you using it.
Right. So I think that with just recognize it for what it is, which I think is what we've done a lot in this episode. Is kind of demystifying AI
and it not being a spooky sort of. So you're telling me it's not demons, right?
Well.
Well, it's like with any sort of technology. Like we're Christians. This is a Christian podcast. Yeah.
If you couldn't tell from the previous episodes,
I feel I believe demons can use technology for their own means and advances. Mm-hmm. An interesting thought. I was listening to some other Christian things, people talking about AI, and why are you giving me that look?
What? I don't do anything.
Talking about like as like technology advances, does the power of this I'm getting wild now. Okay, does the power of demons increases our technology increases?
Does their power increase?
Does their
I wouldn't say that. It would provide them with another avenue of.
Is it like a surface area problem?
Here's an
in that
example.
regard?
Like internet.
Yeah.
Pornography before internet.
Yeah.
Pornography after internet.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Lives destroyed.
Massive difference.
Marriages destroyed.
Right. True addiction.
Yeah.
And well, okay.
Because
since we've opened that avenue, I guess
Sit in for another 30 minutes.
Yeah,
here.
this is going to be our longest episode. There's a lot
It
of
definitely
things.
is.
I'm trying.
I'll break it down. I'll break it.
Good.
I'll break it. Yeah. We're doing.
Okay.
We're not battery powered anymore. We're
Right.
hardwired
Keep
into
going.
the power.
I've got the
I want to keep
technology.
going. I'm fine with this being
So here's where I think we should be specifically cautious with AI.
Mm-hmm.
I think where we see the fact that you can generate it whatever you want. It can be trained. I'm not going to say learn. It can be trained. And so if you apply some of those techniques that make generative AI good, you end up in situations of like true targeted addiction. Like the things that Facebook's been accused of doing and YouTube's been accused of doing and so on and so forth.
Building their algorithms
Of like,
to
yeah,
like feed off of
they're trying to
people's
keep
addictive
you
nature.
in, and the way they feed you the next thing is trying to keep you in longer. And so you have the potential of this just being absolutely magnified.
Yes, I think step one is humans are more valuable than AI. That's step one. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like the governing principle here is like anytime that you're saying, well, it's bad for people, but it's good for AI. It's like, whoa, hold on a second. Could you take a step back and look at yourself for a moment?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's where you come into a lot of the issues because it's not only is it addictive, but it's also exploitative. Because there is something with what you were talking about. You can with the amount of pictures that are out in the world today, that you could train an AI on a particular individual with relative ease at this point. And as AI becomes more capable, like I could create a fake picture of you. Mm-hmm. In the near future.
To your point,
right
one
now,
of the articles I read, it's like something wild, like 70% of the deep fakes that are generated by AI are violent or pornographic in some nature.
That's like there is a.
That was the inference I was making.
Yeah, there's the sinful, like perverse, just sin, I guess. Sorry, my words are failing me. That I feel like AI could potentially feed into all too well. Mm-hmm. You know, I always wondered what it'd be like to be with so and so, and then you also see a lot of like hyper escapism occurring. Mm-hmm. I won't say a lot. You are seeing the early inclination of hyper escapism where people are truly like, I'm just going to go and have my AI wife and live my
and as
AI
the AI
life.
gets better and better, that becomes more and more dangerous.
Right. It does, and I think
Facebook changed their whole company name to further that idea.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Their idea of the metaverse is a bit ahead of it. It's ahead of the technology, obviously, mm-hmm. but the risk of it is real, and this would get into something that you were talking about before, the transhumanist idea.
Mm-hmm. And the debate between like what things are fundamentally human, what fundamentally AI's brought up this whole like it's made people examine like what makes us human.
And that's the problem is that if we don't have a moral approach to any of that, how do you really delineate those?
Yeah, it's as you said. This brings into play a lot of other topics that we've touched on, I would think, in this first season of Up+Out, mm-hmm. Where we've lost so much of our ethical grounding in viewing people as not only body, not only as mind, but also of soul, mm-hmm. and saying that there is a distinction there between those three different parts. And when we get down to that's where you get to the idea of, well, can I just take my brain, put it in a computer, and that be me.
Right.
From the Christian perspective, you would say no.
Right.
But to somebody who has no frame of reference.
Right.
And I think that's getting worse.
Well,
that's terrifying.
There's already like certain celebrities and musicians and artists and so forth that are already working to either one, absolutely safeguard their likeness, their voice, so on, or
like James Earl Jones,
hyperactively, yes. That they are like, now record as much of me as you can and make this a thing that exists in perpetuity, that you have my voice or you have my likeness. It might be Paris Hilton, maybe, I think I heard, is like fully scanned herself in like immense detail and has made an AI likeness of herself that looks, sounds, behaves like her, so you can go and hang out with Paris. Great.
No, thank you. James Earl Jones
that's what I was going to ask.
Let Disney use his voice in perpetuity for Darth Vader. They'll now use AI James Earl Jones.
That's weird.
For Darth
So
Vader.
it was.
Yeah.
So Disney owns James Earl Jones' voice.
I think it's more of, I don't know the details, but I would imagine it's more of a licensing agreement that they get paid, that his estate gets paid for the use of his voice via AI amalgamation, creation, generation.
So weird.
So if you're famous enough, you can utilize your brand and
Currently.
sell your voice and likeness to.
Currently.
Yeah.
But the idea is that, like...
But how do you actually safeguard that would be the other question of, like, now it's out there, every recording of,
copyrights expire.
And copyrights expire, and anybody, I mean, like the sorry, I'm jumping thoughts too frantically.
Wow, we've been so laser focused.
I mean, me personally right now. How breathe. So with James Earl Jones giving up his voice, it's already been all over the internet. Mm-hmm. He's done interviews. He's been in movies. Mm-hmm. He's been in shows.
Anybody can go and take
it's
that.
already in the models to generate the language. Somebody just has to say, hey, do this like James Earl Jones. And it's there. Yeah. What's to stop them from doing that? Mm-hmm. There aren't enough lawyers, time, however you want to approach this problem in the world.
As silly as it is, was it 30 Rock made a joke about this back in, what was that show?
That would have been
like
a while
2018?
Like 15 years?
Yeah. Or maybe,
no, it
wasn't that
long
ago.
30 Rock's not older than that?
It's got to be.
Maybe early 2010s. It wasn't.
Maybe so. Okay.
It was like, I think it was late noughties, early tens.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yes, I call the 2000s the noughties. Okay, that's how I roll.
Anyways,
there's a certain degree of Anglophile in me. Okay. C.S. Lewis is great. Okay. All right. Now that we're really good.
What was the 30 Rock thing?
That Alec Baldwin's character in that show, when he was going through college, paid his way through college by doing recordings for essentially an early version of like an AI chatbot, and they could make him say whatever he wanted in the show. So that's exactly what you're talking about. They were just they found it was this free use AI voice, and like, oh, this is our boss Jack Lemmon. That's the character's name. So that's what you're talking about.
Oh yeah,
and that's how do you for us even at this point
we're out there
for us even.
Yeah.
There could be some. Not everything you hear on the internet was said by me. Okay,
well, I guess
probably it was, but maybe not.
I think that almost is like the next Christian answer is like how do we properly engage people, and especially like children growing up to, and I do believe, Zander, you've said this multiple times, that as it gets better we will get more aware.
Yeah.
Like our ability to perceive information is vast. And but with like children growing up and it's already out there. Pandora's box has been opened. And so now I would be far more interested in, like, I have 3 sons. With all of them, I intend to, introduce them to this idea in an appropriate manner, and then teach them what this should be for, and then begin safeguarding them against misuse or even being taken a fool of for it. You have our recordings could be used to manipulate us with deep fakes of like, oh look, you guys follow Sam, and look, he's he said this, and AI generates me saying something. I mean, it's already been used, like people asking for money and so on and so forth. Scam callers only get worse.
I feel like
there's plenty of scam YouTube.
I also feel like
ads I've seen.
I feel like that'll be used in the political sphere a lot too.
Yes, there's a big worry about that. But yes, going off of what you both have talked about is we do need to supply the ethical structure for how to use it.
Yes.
Is what it boils down to. So I mean, yeah, like I said, we both have admitted to using AI.
I'm so sorry.
But in my practice,
yeah,
what I've used it for, it is like you said, things I can't do on my own, and I can't afford to pay someone to do it.
Right.
It's very small little projects, so it's not like I'm taking food out of anybody's mouth at the moment.
It allows somebody to be more productive.
It allows with basically every technological advancement, it's allowed a multiplication of human productivity.
Right.
So, and each time that we hit one, it is almost unfathomable how we will find a way to use our time for those purposes. So it's hard seeing past the horizon of tomorrow. I don't know why I said it like that, but that was way too esoteric, way too far, man. What I think is that we just need to go ahead and start the moon base. That's what we need.
The moon base.
And this is, I'm only speaking partially tongue in cheek, is that I do think that
we need the new focus,
the new frontier.
Yes.
That we need the new frontier.
Yes.
So the United States should take over the moon and just say it's ours, and we should
won't create any problems.
No, this would be great.
And then Manifest Destiny isn't only for the West Coast; it's for the intergalactic
Empire.
Imperium
Elon
of
Musk.
Man. Too much. What is it? Warhammer 40K coming through my feed. Imperium of Man.
Yeah.
I don't actually partake, okay? It's just trying to get me into it. They're trying to get me into it. That algorithm. That AI Facebook algorithm. I don't want.
I do think it is like we're hyper fixated. It's a zeitgeist problem. Like it is so in the now that AI is everything. And I mean, even some of the people that I work with that were like the most enthusiastic about AI and using it with like the next frontier of programming and so on and so forth have already cooled off massively.
Yeah.
They're still engaging with it, but
we don't even have to go back that far.
No.
Like, just go back to electricity, right? Mm-hmm. People are doing all sorts of weird stuff with electricity. Running probes through people, saying that you can just shock them, make them better.
Right.
Or like, radium. Like, there's this one story about this guy, about, like, this radioactive material that if you drank it, it would give you a buzz. But it was also radioactive material, so this guy's jaw literally just fell off one day because he did so much with it. Or like they would have x-rays for fun, and whoopsies, unregulated x-rays are really bad for your guts. I don't know if you know this.
It's crazy. Just crazy.
But so there's a learning curve. Every time that we have some sort of crazy invention, there's a huge learning curve, and people will get hurt. And our job is to try to minimize the human cost of a new technology.
That's a good way of putting that.
I think the struggle is this is really just the inception of this conversation. We aren't really answering the question per se.
Don't use it. There you go.
Well, we're establishing principles as we move forward.
Like here's your framework to engage with. It is definitely a good.
There's this little something called the golden rule. I don't know if you've heard about it before.
So we ourselves are really like failing to actually answer like what should we do with AI, because we don't know. It's so early, and
it plays into our pandemic episode. Is like skepticism first and foremost.
Right.
Like, don't take everything for granted.
Right.
So, part of our discussion here is about how to start to be able to make coherent decisions based off of at least a tangential, a partial knowledge of how this all works.
Mm-hmm.
The demystifying, like I said, so that you can say, okay, well, I kind of know how this works. So it's not. I don't feel like I'm going to be left behind now.
Right.
I don't feel like I'm going to be behind the times. I can understand what people are talking about and be able to make informed decisions about how to interact with this going forward.
Right.
Because a lot of those questions we don't have the answers to yet. So, yeah, I don't think... I'll go back to it again. I don't think that AI should take away everybody's job just because it saves companies money.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a balancing act there.
Yeah, there's always the wisdom of knowing how to use said tool.
Right.
And, not just doing it because you can. Not just, because it's cheap, easy.
Capitalism is not inherently good.
Right.
It is inherently useful.
Right.
But just because it saves a company money doesn't mean it's ethically good.
Right.
There has to be a substructure beneath it in order to... You have to have human validation for capitalistic decisions. It's
Right.
as though every technology relies on humans to be used appropriately.
It's
And that's where the demons could get in trouble. Because if we let the demons decide, then it definitely won't be good.
But you also need morally informed, good humans making those decisions.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that back in. I absolutely agree that...
And there's less and less of them?
It tend to be fewer and fewer.
Okay.
Thank you, Zander. We learn something every day.
Well, do you have any other notes for us to cover on this episode?
No. I actually had written down notes on the entire history of AI, obviously summarized.
Yeah.
But through the decades and and points into antiquity. But I wanted to say thank you for everybody for joining us. This is our end of season 1. These 6 episodes, 3 up and 3 out, will be our season. We will be returning in the near future with a new season. Can't tell you yet where that will be, but we will be posting on our platforms so that is communicated well. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. You can find us on Substack, on YouTube, and on the major podcast providers. We are planning to do some paid goodies in the future.
On the Substack specifically.
Yeah. Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind, please comment and give us some ideas for future topics that you would love for us to talk about and hopefully engage with us on as well. And as always, read your Bible.
Go read your Bible! Go read your Bible!